Gracing the annual conference 2022 of AAT Sri Lanka, we are ready to start the post-morning refreshing session. The first technical session, ladies and gentlemen, we will first have a presentation followed by the panel discussion. So it gives me great pleasure to call upon the presenter to take us through the first session. Mr. Talal Rafi is a senior global management consultant at Deloitte and was on Deloitte's global ESG operations team. He's an expert member of the World Economic Forum and co-chairs the Global Plastic Innovation Network Action Group of the World Economic Forum. He's also on the National Agenda Committee of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, was on a selection committee of the Asian Development Bank's Digital Against COVID-19 Innovation Series. He has given talks globally, including at the NASDAQ Center, S&P Global, and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and contributes regularly with thought leadership for the Dow's agenda. His work has been published by the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Asian Development Bank, World Economic Forum, UNFCCC, London School of Economics, and Forbes. Ladies and gentlemen, to address first in the technical session one, please welcome Mr. Talal Rafi.
Sure. My thanks to AAT, the President, Governing Council, and especially Damit Gangoda-Vilake and Shamila Kure, and also the following discussions with a very eminent panel chaired by Reyaz Mihular, who needs no introduction. So this is going to be a very interesting topic, or a very important topic, gaining sustainability. I mean, we can come out of this crisis, but we need to be sustainable. The growth has to be sustainable. So with this, I'm going to divide my talk into 5 parts. First, I'm going to talk about the crisis, how we got here, because we cannot gain sustainability without knowing how we got here or what the actual crisis is. And then some of the challenges faced by SMEs or businesses as a whole, and the opportunities. And then I'll come on to some of the recommendations for the businesses. And finally, touch on policy recommendations. Right. So let's see where we are at the moment. Very high interest rates, high taxation, and high inflation. It's a triple whammy. So when businesses are in a crisis facing all three, it's a bit of a crisis, I don't have to say, and I'll come back to this later. And the limited ability to import due to a forex crisis, and at the same time, restrictions and increasing poverty. So when the IMF team was here, I was part of the delegation meeting them. And I would say that over half of the time was spent by the IMF delegation here speaking about the issue of poverty. So it's something that they take seriously. And we'll have to touch on the global economy as well, because right now the world is so globalized that whatever happens outside is going to affect us. So here again, we face high inflation, very high interest rates. Sorry, not as high as Sri Lanka, but still up to a level. Certain countries such as Indonesia and China have very low, because China is also going through a zero COVID crisis, and very high energy prices due to the Russia-Ukraine war, followed by food prices to the same reasons. And China's zero COVID policy is causing a lot of issues in the global supply chains. So that's kind of affecting inflation around the world as well. And the OECD has predicted that the economic growth next year globally will come down to 2.2% from 3.1%. But Fitch actually gives an even gloomier picture. So right now we are in a crisis where the friends who can help us are also in a bit of a trouble. So makes the situation a bit worse for us. So how did we get here? So let me speak about the past 2 years. So it started with the famous tax cuts. So because of that, the 3 global rating agencies downgraded us. And so we lost access to capital markets. Then we were hit by COVID. So tourism was affected, remittances coming from abroad, and exports. And a few policy decisions that went wrong were the fertilizer ban, the monetary theory followed by the central bank, especially printing money and saying it doesn't cause inflation, pegging the rupee to 203 while the market rate was much higher, and not engaging with the IMF much earlier, even though many economists were saying we should have gone to the IMF much earlier, when our debt was much more sustainable at sustainable levels. And of course, Sri Lanka defaulted. So right now, where are we? So we're seeking an IMF program. Currently, it's on the mode is debt restructuring, because right now our debt is unsustainable. And the biggest block here would be China, because we have three types of creditors: the bilaterals, where China is the largest creditor, followed by Japan and India. And of course, the bondholders and the multilaterals, whom we don't usually restructure. And another thing of the IMF is they want a primary budget surplus of 2.3% by 2025. So currently, we have a primary budget deficit of -4%. So it's a very tall order. 6.5% fiscal consolidation is going to be very tough. And then there's this looming question about domestic debt restructuring. The positive thing is that in Zambia, the IMF has advised that, it's okay to forego that. But in Sri Lanka, it's a bit more complicated because most of the interest payments come here. But let's hope that it doesn't happen, because it's going to have a disastrous effect on the financial and banking sector. So what are some of the structural causes? So most of these were from a paper I co-wrote with Professor Sirimal Aberatne. So some of the things are populist policies. So we've had decades of populist policies, like, for example, subsidies. We can start with rice from the moon, or low bread prices, free fertilizer, and many other things. I mean, cheaper fuel while the rest of the world was pumping at a higher rate. And of course, at that time, nobody questioned, and people willingly voted. And right now, 2022 is the year we are going to pay for it. And public sector expansion. So between 2005 to 2015, the public sector has doubled. So this is also has a crowding out effect. So the private sector is also a bit finding it hard to recruit, because about 1 in 6 people who are able to work, working age, work for the government. And with 1.4 million, it's extremely unsustainable to continue. So these are some of the structural causes, and low taxation. So we speak about high taxation right now, but Sri Lanka has had a very low rate of taxation, almost like 12% revenue to GDP before 2019, and now it's come to 8%, which is one of the lowest in the world. Coming to fiscal policies, large deficits. So even a primary budget surplus has only been achieved 4 times in the last 70 years. So that's a primary budget surplus. So fiscal deficits, I don't even have to speak about. So where consistently the government spends more than it gains. And this is unsustainable. And it's been done through 2 ways. Monetary financing, of course, the central bank borrowing from the central bank, which in layman's language is printing more money, and debt, both globally and domestically, especially from the 2 state-owned banks. So other reasons, I'll come on speak in detail about this later. Lack of entrepreneurship, I would say. Protectionist policies, because most of the sectors here are protected by the government, so unable to compete in the world, rest of the world. And it also discourages them from looking out when they're too comfortable in the domestic scene. Sentiments against investments. So this is something like I was speaking to a former chairman of JIC, and he was telling me that recently Gautam Adani came here. And if it was any other country, they would be rolling out a red carpet. But here, of course, he was met with protests. So with this kind of an attitude, it's a bit difficult. Red tape, labor and land laws, for example, highest retrenchment costs in the world. When it comes to land, almost 82% of the land is owned by the government. So this means even private people who lease it out don't want to invest heavily because it's not their land and they don't take care of it. well either. Lack of FTAs, which I'll come on to later. So these are some of the structural causes. So coming on the more micro side, challenges faced by businesses. So high interest rates, very difficult to operate. Many businesses I speak to say that, why put your capital to expand operations when you can put it in a fixed deposit and get a guaranteed return. So that's a bit of a discouragement there, and very difficult to operate as well. Higher taxation. So I think we have to pay it, but it's also something that not the right time to hike taxes so high, especially when the people's the level of spending they have is quite low. Very high inflation, almost 60% according to the central bank recently. And access to finance is also an issue. Most of the banks lending with asset-based lending as opposed to cash flow. Low adoption of technology is another issue faced by businesses. Lack of entrepreneurial skills. So I'm on the Enterprise Operations Committee of Moratuwa University. And what we find here is that technical skills, people have one of the best in Sri Lanka. They're great minds, but entrepreneurial skills are a bit lacking, which we need to work on. Communications, presentation, financial skills. And moving on to bureaucracy, of course, getting approvals, others are quite tough. And lastly, very tough to import. So these are some of the challenges faced by businesses. So what is the opportunity here? So we have a great opportunity, strategic location. India is, in the coming decades, set to become the largest economy in the world, possibly, with already set to have the largest population, and it's rising heavily. So we already have a free trade agreement. So utilizing that would be to our maximum benefit. On the west, we have the oil-rich Gulf countries. And on this side, the South Asian countries, the ASEAN countries that are quite developed. So with a strategic location such as this, we could outdo Dubai and even Singapore if we had the correct framework and mindset in place. Human capital, we have some of the best. As I said, I work with Moratuwa University. Most of the students go on to work for Google, Microsoft, and others. So, and also most of the MNCs outsource their things here, from the London Stock Exchange to even the US military technology-based work in Sri Lanka. So we have an excellent human capital, which we need to utilize. And unfortunately, there's a huge brain drain. They're moving away from the country. Resilience, we're a country that faced so many crises, from a war to a pandemic, and currently the economic crisis, and we always have the ability to come up again. And opportunities, renewable energy. Recently, the World Bank said Sri Lanka has a very good high opportunity in offshore wind power generating. So with India just to the north of us needing more energy, so it's a good time to capitalize on this. Not only that, but solar energy. And also, most people don't know this. When it comes to rivers in Sri Lanka, we have one of the highest rivers for a certain area, the opportunity for hydropower. And tourism, as we know, Lonely Planet named us as one of the best destinations, or if not the #1 in the world. So if we can properly utilize all this, we can not only survive, but revive and become a great nation once again. So what can businesses do? So I was told to tackle the micro side and the macro, so I'll come on to what the businesses can do. So as somebody who's worked with a number of businesses for projects with the World Bank or the World Economic Forum, what I find is that when it comes to businesses, especially startups or even SMEs, the #1 reason they fail is lack of market research. Most of these people go into a business and don't even, most of the time, they don't have a product that fits the market's needs. They spend 2 to 3 years developing a product, so much of hard work. I mean, the product is excellent if it was to put in front of a university's evaluating committee, but the market simply doesn't need it. Or even a company that brings out something. So simple market research would help a lot in this crisis, especially for businesses to become more sustainable. Technology adoption, that's something that can streamline everything, make it more efficient. Outsourcing, because during my work at Deloitte Consulting, we find that a lot of businesses have certain people working who are only needed for a few number of days a month. So if this work can be outsourced to other companies, it can reduce overheads and make the companies more efficient. Organizational transformation. So we are moving into a society where it's flatter structures. So the hierarchy is much lower. You should be able to, even a mid-manager should be able to speak to the MD or the chairman about ideas, being open. That encourages creativity and innovation. And not just that, like also moving around, like having people work with different departments. Because one thing we find in Sri Lanka is that people operate in silos. So if that can be broken, it can be made into a more innovative business. Communicating better to the workforce. So recently, for a global company, which was a Fortune 500 company, I had the opportunity of interacting with the board. So they had, so one of the first things was an experiment we did, like asking the board directors, so these are highly educated people with experience, about 7 of them, what is the strategy of your company? And it was a bit shocking because all 7 of them gave very different answers. So communicating to the workforce, what is your strategy in a very clear way? Like you can have the company goal at growing at 10% revenue, but what does that mean for the person at the very bottom? What does that mean for the mid-manager? What does it mean for the person at HR? What does he have to do to attain that? So a way where you can clearly break out the goals, each person can be given a certain role, what he has to fulfill, makes things more efficient. And finally, thinking like a consultant. So I don't mean to promote myself, but I find that being a consultant kind of helps people in the corporate world. Like you find very successful business leaders being former consultants, Sundar Pichai, Indra Nooyi, or even the famous banker, Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan. So what we find is that the ability to analyze problems, the ability to go into an industry that we don't even know about, but we're given 3 to 4 weeks to completely study and then go in front of a board and explain and tell them what is wrong with the business, what we can do. So these things help. So in this kind of crisis, it's always helpful to do that. Another thing about consultants is that, we work in different areas. Like I used to work for on ESG projects, then strategy, and now on human capital. So that's just another point. So these are some of my recommendations from my experience, at least. And finally, coming on to recommendations for a sustainable economy. The number one thing, as I said, I will speak on is a focus on entrepreneurship development. Why I put this number one is because most of the reasons, let's come with the figures. Only 1% of Sri Lankans are formal entrepreneurs. Only if you add informal, it comes up to 3%. So when you look at Bangladesh, it's 12%. When you look at Vietnam, Thailand, it goes up to 20%. So a lack of entrepreneurs means a lack of job creators. So we have a lot of job seekers being put out by universities and other organizations, but where are the job creators? So we need to create more job creators. So industrialists such as Tamika Pereira or Hari Jayawardena, if they decided to be a professional instead of an entrepreneur, many people would not have a job working under them right now. So this also is a reason why many people prefer to work for the public sector, because there are no entrepreneurs coming forward to grow the private sector. I mean, the private sector can grow in 2 ways. One is for existing companies to expand their operations, or for new companies to come up. So focus on entrepreneurship development would be a huge priority. The second thing is independence of the central bank. So this is the number one thing which can put the government in its place, where they can have discipline. Because right now, the government spends more than it earns. So this is not unsustainable. So anybody running a family or a small business knows that we cannot keep spending more than we get. Either we have to borrow or print money. The government has the option of printing money. So that is the only difference between all of us here and the government. So an independent central bank will put a stop to that. So they will not be able to print much money and cause inflation. Because if you see, for decades, Sri Lanka, though it's been in single digits, Sri Lanka has a consistently higher inflation rate when compared to the rest of the region. So that's one cause. Number 3, restructuring SOEs. Here, for example, a lot of people, even Thilan was saying earlier, is that, people say, why do we have to profit-making SOEs? But the whole question is like, what is the objective of a SOE? Obviously, the government needs to own certain enterprises. Of course, I agree with that. Some things that are very essential. But at the same time, does the government really have to be in the airline business or retail or hotels? Of course. So putting these away would give the government, the ministers, the president, the prime minister, more time to focus on policy decisions and regulations instead of doing the work of the private sector in managing companies. So that is a priority to make it more efficient. Plus, a very huge percentage of government revenue goes to paying salaries and pensions. And this, as I was having a conversation with former Governor Indrajit Kumaraswamy, he said that the effects of this can be felt in the coming 2 decades, when all these people will retire and we will have to pay the pension. So our children are going to face an even bigger crisis than us. Improved tax regime. So as I mentioned, we have one of the lowest tax rates in the world, 8% to GDP, government revenue. So not only increasing this, but also focusing on where we get our taxes from. Right now, 75% of the gains come from indirect taxes. So that is VAT and others, which the poorer segments of society pay, while only 2% out of the 8%, so that's 25%, come from income tax. So rightfully, how the richer classes should be paying. So increasing tax regime would be improving would be another option. So another example is Estonia, which has made the tax system so efficient that it only takes around 5 days a year for a company there to sort out all their whatever payments they have to do. An export-oriented economy. Right now, we have a huge foreign debt, which has to pay it in dollars. So unfortunately, we cannot print it like the US government can. But so only way out is to export further. And how do we export? Like one thing is the businesses have to be made, like the president said, made more competitive. Reducing, we have a very protected society here, especially keeping people from importing inside, and a very complex tariff regime. So reducing that will help our companies compete within Sri Lanka so they can move out further. And the sixth is how we get into business in the global. One thing is tapping into global supply chains, and free trade agreements will help for this. One example is China. For example, China, as we know, is a manufacturing superpower. Even the United States cannot compete with it. But even to make an iPhone in China, China is unable to do it, even with all their infrastructure. So components from 43 different countries come in to make an iPhone in China, and only 7% of the value addition is done in China. So what we find is that, but it still created 1.3 million jobs. And it also cost a lot of management skill transfer, technology skill transfer. Like when you look at 90s in China, most of the people, the leaders there, especially wanted foreign direct investment into specific companies where they knew they lacked management skills. The local population lacked management skills. So people here, I see the government saying FDIs we need because we need dollars, we need to come out of crisis, we need to create jobs. But another 2 reasons would be, why not look at it as technology transfer, how to gain technology, how to gain management skills. Look at Sri Lanka Telecom, because it was managed by a Japanese company. We learned Emirates, we could have studied how the Emirates global leaders did it. So that is something that we need to be on, curious, learn more. And for that, we need FTAs. No large company is going to come and invest with us. I mean, we're a great country, but unfortunately, we only have 22 million people, and it's an $80 billion economy. So now it's even lower due to a contraction by 9%. So we need to have FTAs. So with a lot of trade disputes, like, for example, many countries who want to export into China or India or rest of the region can use our place as a base. So more FTAs are needed. I mean, Vietnam, which opened its economy much later than us, has 26 free trade agreements. Sri Lanka only has 3. And they also have, in the past, I think, sorry if I get the stats wrong, in the past 2 decades, they brought in like 54 new products for the export list, while we have much less. And each of their products were like bringing in almost $1 billion over time. So while ours was much less in the single-digit millions. So we need to also focus on the kind of products we are going to export. And ease of doing business, of course, we are ranked 99th in the world, according to the World Bank's ease of doing business. And it takes around 2 weeks to open a business. And the other thing that people focus little on or pay attention to is closing down a business. It takes almost a year to close down a business. So here again, most people I speak to are discouraged to register a limited liability company because of the hassle of closing one. So these have to be made quite easy. And especially when it comes to business contract enforcement or resolving a legal dispute, we are ranked 162nd in the world. That's almost below even many African countries. So this is a bit of a challenge. So it takes on average 4 years, according to the World Bank, to resolve a legal dispute in Sri Lanka. So while any foreign company coming here would think not just twice or thrice, but many dozen times before coming in. Innovation is important. Recently, I wrote a paper for the IMF on how innovation increases economic growth. So here, the priority is that what we find is that what people don't know is for centuries, there was very little economic growth, hardly 1% or 0%. Only after the Industrial Revolution did the whole concept of economies growing come up. So that was because of innovation. We find that throughout history, with each innovation, new product coming in, new ways of working, efficiency increases, and due to that, the economies boom. So this whole concept about economic growth came about because of innovation. If not, we would have been like the Roman Empire or others. We have to just conquer countries or increase our population to grow. Lastly, the last page, green economy is a huge opportunity. As I was mentioning before, offshore wind, many other areas such as solar power. And also we need to go into this because what we find is that new laws are coming up, like the EU taxonomy or the recent US Security Exchange Commission laws, which require products to be more sustainable to tap into their markets. So if Sri Lanka can move into this area much faster, we'll have a competitive advantage over others. Labor reforms, as I mentioned, very high retrenchment costs, and also half of our students come out from the arts degree. So these are some of the challenges that we face. Only 4,000 STEM graduates, 5,000, but even 1,000 leave the country. So these are some of the challenges here. And I'll just cut it short because I'm running out of time. Gender equality. So this is a topic that I worked with several multilaterals on. It's a very important thing because we always talk about investments, technology, everything, but we don't see the potential of women. Only 37% of women work in the country. And it's like, if we can improve this, according to studies, there is a potential to expand the economy by a further $20 billion and the global economy by $28 trillion if the gender gap can be bridged. So this is one area we need to really work on. What we find is that most of the female-owned companies tend to be micro to small. So one of the recommendations where I was on the team of experts with Chatham House was that to find accelerators where we can specifically target female-owned enterprises to expand more, come up, and also focus on different industries. Because there's a lack of female-owned enterprises in businesses in technology-related areas or financial areas, which are growing very much further. And finally, my last point would be consistent policies. We have, everyone knows how policies change, tax rates change, everything changes in this country with a government, not only the ministers, but also the secretaries change. And then if you go to a government office, you get completely new people there. So with this type of inconsistency, it's very difficult for a corporate company to plan for the next 5 to 10 years. So consistent policies, even if it's a bit higher taxes compared to the rest of the region, we can have something that's extremely consistent. And for the next 10 years, where we can have consensus among all political parties, the governing party, the opposition party, and others, I think this country can move forward in a very sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Talal Rafi, setting the tone for the technical session 1 of the annual conference of AAT Sri Lanka. I would like to call upon Mr. Rafi to take a respective seat in the main panel as we welcome the panelist and the session chair to take us through the panel discussion. First, we have the session chair, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Reyaz Mihular, who is the chairman of the Bairaha Farms PLC, served the board of Bairaha Farms from January 2022 as an independent non-executive director. He is the former managing partner of KPMG Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Having served in the role since April 2012, he served a 3-year term as chairman of the KPMG MESA, the Middle East and South Asia Regional Board until September 2021. He's a past president and the fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka and was the chairman of the SEMA Sri Lanka division during the year 2013 and a fellow member of SEMA UK and a member of the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants USA since Jan 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Reyaz Mihular. Next, we have Ms. Jayanthi Dharmasena, who is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants UK, joined the Hayleys Group as the management accountant in 1991 and has been in agriculture-related businesses throughout her journey, with the group spanning 31 years plus experience to date. She has held senior managerial positions in the Hayleys agriculture sector, including 2 years as the deputy managing director prior to her appointment as the managing director of the sector. Ladies and gentlemen, managing director of Hayleys Agriculture Holdings Limited, Ms. Jayanthi Dharmasena. Next, we have Mr. Mahen, the group finance director, CBL Group, who has more than 20 years of experience in finance and general business management and has held numerous senior roles in local, international, and multinational corporates with significant exposure to group environments. Mahen also possesses over 15 years of international work experience, the majority of which has been gained within the corporate environment of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, the Group Finance Director of CBL, Mr. Mahen. Next, we have the Group Managing Director, Sunshine Holdings PLC, also the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, who is a respected leader, visionary, and industry veteran whose experience, skilled in the art of social responsible entrepreneurship and strategic foresight, continues to uplift Sri Lanka's private business landscape. With over 26 years at its helm, Vish is the Group Managing Director of diversified conglomerate Sunshine Holdings PLC, which is today one of Sri Lanka's top 50 listed organizations, and also the chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the country's premier business chamber with 183-year-old history. Over to the session chair to take us to the technical session 1 for the next 45 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, thank you. So we had a presentation by Talal. He took us through some interesting issues. As this country, as you know, we were in a survival mode in the early part of the year. And I think I believe we are getting over the hump slowly, but steadily. And therefore, it's now time to look at revival. So I believe that the theme survival and revival, I think, is a very appropriate theme. Personally, I believe what happened to Sri Lanka is a good thing. I know we all went through a lot of pain, but sometimes we need a shock like this to reset ourselves. I think we were living in blissful, shall I say, comfort, where we were spending more than we were earning. Now, I think, consequent to the challenges that we're facing, I think the country is ready for some very, sometimes brutal, but very necessary reforms to put us in the revival mode. I also believe that the country is also, I think, in the right mood right now to not allow politicians to decide their fate solely. I think we did that, and the country has come to a situation it doesn't deserve to be in. So I think these are changes that are good, augurs well for the country. So with those few words, I will move on to try and invite the panelists to initially make their initial remarks on the subject, and thereafter I will move on to the question and answer. So starting off with the captain of industry, Vish. Vish, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Reyaz, and thanks for AAT for having me here this morning. I think this is a subject that's in everybody's mind, that what we are discussing here, and I think the presenter made it very clear to all of us why we are here and how we got here and how we need to get out. So I think this is a time as Sri Lankans, we all have to make some sacrifices. This is not the time to ask Sri Lanka what it can do for you. I think it's time that you ask yourself what you can do for Sri Lanka. So the next, I don't know, 6 months, 18 months is going to be extremely challenging. If we go through the type of reforms that are on the table, and it's not only the government reforms that we are talking about. I think everybody in this room, every private sector, every corporate, every SME has to reform. We cannot keep doing what we are doing today and expect a different result. All our businesses need to rethink the way we do businesses. We cannot get special treatments. We cannot get freebies. Freebies should be out of the window. I think the chairman said that we have lived beyond our means. I think that's the word. Yes, there is a group of vulnerables that we need to take care during this difficult time, but that cannot be forever. We need to revive them to a level where they can look after themselves. There's a saying that, when you're hungry, don't give the person fish, but teach them to fish, because then it's better to find the fish than keep giving them fish when they're hungry. And I think that's what we need to get at. Recently, and I heard the president say, one of the ways to come out of this is to improve our exports. We have been too dependent on budgetary supplements by various bilaterals, just keep giving us money so that we just keep marching on, and you know what happened. But can we do the type of exports that we are doing today and expect different results? We can't. We need to go to a higher service-led exports in the financial services, IT services, etc., where it's far more value-added than the type of exports that we are doing today. So these are the changes, I think, sweeping changes that has to happen. And for this to happen, I think, you heard the term ease of doing business, etc. All this, and again, we can't expect just the government to do all this overnight. We are all part of this puzzle, the problem, and we need to support it to get through. So I'll stop there and we'll hear from the others.
Thank you, Vish. I'm going to ask Jayanthi. Jayanthi, one of the critical things that took us to this mess was the fertilizer ban. And coming from an agricultural sector, I'm sure you'll have a lot of things to say. So your remarks.
Hi, I'm sure I'm audible. Yes. Talking of sustainability in agriculture, for not only for Sri Lanka, globally, food security is absolutely of paramount importance. And the same for Sri Lanka. And when I say food security, there is no way that we can actually look for other countries to help us. Prior to the pandemic, we had this opportunity of quickly asking India or Bangladesh to give us some excess of what they have. But if you, you would know now that globally all countries are very particular about their food security. In fact, if you take Malaysia, they don't want to even export chicken and poultry products. Singapore was dependent on them as well, because they want to make sure that their people had the food at the right time and the right quality. So going forward, it will be very, very difficult for us to be depending on other countries to help us if we haven't got it right. Secondly, sustainability in agriculture is so essential for Sri Lanka because say 30% of our labor force is in agriculture, and particularly the rural areas. And you can imagine the socio-economic impact if this actually crashes. So having said that, we also know that growing just because we have to grow or because traditionally farmers have been growing does not work. Sustainability has to be brought in with knowledge. And that is why, for example, in one area, if we are growing, say some vegetable crop, the whole country thinks, okay, the price is good, let's all grow that. But that doesn't work that way. You have to use data. And that's why agrarian services should be actually using that information, because they have the entire farmer base. Why I'm saying that is, if we go on in the same way that we are doing, we will always have the same problem, and there'll be a lot of resources wasted. Land mass doesn't grow, so you have to get the best out of what you have, and that way we have to make sure that we use knowledge, we use efficient processes, and we actually stop the waste. Thirdly, when we talk of what really went wrong, it's one part was, of course, the sudden decision to go organic. We must realize while organic is very good and it gives, health benefits, and it's a wonderful feeling, and you can actually export and get higher foreign exchange, we must realize that we have 22 million people to feed, and we cannot ask them to buy something very expensive, and it will be hard done because there won't be enough to feed these people. So as a responsible government and as responsible industry players, we have to work together to ensure that food security in this country is actually ensured, and that we get the best out of the landmass. And when we are competing with the globe, we must make sure that we are very competitive. Otherwise, our products will not stand a chance. Particularly, India is growing by 6%. And you can imagine how much they will be a threat to us, because on the global platform, European countries are also going through recession. They'll be looking for the cheapest source of the right quality, and we cannot do it on scale. So at least we must make sure that our quality is right, and we are extremely competitive, cutting down on waste. So sustainability in agriculture has to be thought through with knowledge and looking for efficiencies.
Thank you, Jayanthi. I'll turn to Mahen from an industry perspective. Your initial thoughts?
Thank you, Reyaz, and thank you, AAT, for having me. I think we all know the scale of the problem where we are. And I think this is quite a pertinent topic that we are discussing today. To me, if we are looking at sustainability, how we come out of this situation in a sustainable manner, right? I think one of the things we cannot ignore today is the need for political reform. This is like, it's the foundation of it all. And I say this because the political machinery, it's like the root of the tree. It influences the entire tree. You can't limit its influence to one particular branch, or to the top, or to the bottom, or to any other sides of the tree. We direly need political reform. We need it urgently. And when I talk about reform, I think we need two important aspects. That is accountability and responsibility. Both these two important aspects are lacking today. And it is one of the main reasons why we are where we are. We did not fall into this crisis with eyes blind. We were driven towards it. We were taken at high speed. The On the vehicle, all the dashboard warning lights were red. Outside on the street, all the intersection traffic lights were red. Still, we went at high speed, expecting to get to some point of nirvana. But we all know where we ended up. So we need accountability and we need responsibility, and it should come urgently. The second point I want to touch base on is about our disciplines. We need to have our own disciplines, and that's something for all of us, not just for a particular segment of society. We can't go on living beyond our means. We need to bite the bullet. We need to make changes. If we are going to come out of this successfully, right, we need to make those changes. We need to make rapid changes. And, you know, being disciplined is not rocket science. You got to learn to say no. That's all it takes. And that will bring us the discipline that we need. So that is important. And the final thing I want to touch on is, you know, law and order. We need law and order. We need it to be effective, right? No foreign investor is going to come here when there is lack of law and order. We need foreign investments. Our FDI story is abysmal. It's very poor. How do we bring in foreign investors? How do we spur this economy? How do we move away from the current practices of having the law strictly applied to one segment of society, mediocrely applied to another segment of society, and have a different segment of society that lives completely above the law? So these things need to change. And this change is important for us as a society and as a vibrant democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. I think having gone through the initial remarks, I'm going to come to the more interesting part of some questions, and I'm going to maybe some questions that may be a little uncomfortable, but I know we have some masters at the game here who can handle it quite well. I'm going to start with Vish as the captain of the industry. You know, the government has rightfully identified that poverty is going to be an issue with increases in prices and taxes. And even the IMF has identified that. Shouldn't we handle the issue of poverty in a properly organized, as if it is like we run a business? I don't think we can leave it to the government to just do handouts as they've been doing before. So I'm just wondering whether as the chamber, as the private sector, can we not come up with a structure, a platform or whatever, where we can address in a more professional, just as much as we do in our own businesses. So I'm just, because we leave it to the government, we will have a version of Samruddhi 2, which I know IMF is not happy about. So my question to you is, from the chamber, isn't there something that we can come up with a structure as a private sector, which we can tell the government, not saying if you want to do, but you have to do it this way?
I think good question. And I think chamber is working very hard on this particular fact. And during the pandemic, I'm sure all of you witnessed when certain politicians got up on small tables and were handing out 5,000 rupee notes. And now how demeaning is that as Sri Lankans to watch, you know, a politician handing out 5,000 rupee notes to his likes or dislikes, when the poor people, you also saw that they did not get it. And some of the guys who didn't deserve also managed to get onto the queue. So I totally agree, and this is not the way to do it. I think first is to have a database of finding out who is that segment. It's not very difficult. You know, we are probably one of the countries that had a identification system long before most of the other countries had. It's very, very easy. It's not rocket science. So once that is done, we have requested through the chamber, and this is being discussed, and I'm told at the Treasury, this is being now worked on. Most of these people, however, in the poverty line that they have an electricity connection, right? And this is one way where they can pay on to the electrical system, to their invoice of the electrical system, a direct deposit, bypassing all political hands that can be made into that account. of some sort, even because they say the moment you say direct deposit, they say these people don't have bank accounts, right? So even before we get bank accounts, they all have an electricity account. And this has been time tested in different parts of the world where this type of group is helped through this. So this is something that we are proposing and we hope it gets through. But at the same time, we have to see how we can help these people get out of this place where they're in. And we need to find the root. Why are they in that place? Why is poverty, stricken? Why can't we get them employed? At least one member of that family should be given employment. I think Talal spoke about land. There is a lot of land that, can be given out for, productive use. It doesn't have to be the same thing grown like every farmer is growing. There's so much more productive things that can be done through land. So,
Yeah, thanks, Vish. I know it's going to be a tough challenge because the politicians will want to hold on to, because that's how they win their votes. But I think it's something that the chamber has to do. We got to ram it down their throat if we need to. But talking of land, I'm going to come back to Jayanthi. You see, one of the problems with our agriculture is that if you go, we are still doing the same old, I know, maybe you'll find a tractor plowing the field and, but if you just go around to our neighboring countries, agriculture's moved ahead. They're using a lot more technology, a lot more machinery, greater techniques. I mean, when are we, if you're going to talk about sustainable agriculture, we have limited land. I know we have a lot of land, but still it's limited. Shouldn't we find drive change to get more productive use of the land using technology and data that you said? What do you think that you, as a managing director of a leading company, would suggest how we go about doing that?
Yeah. Most important thing is that we actually should have a complete list of the farmers that we have. Because it's sometimes we have part-time farmers, sometimes the farmer that is registered now is not the farmer the next season. So when we have that, then we know, for example, technology is expensive. A tractor today is more than 4-5 million. But if we have cluster farming, where, for example, we are actually blessed because sometimes when the season starts, it doesn't start throughout at the same time because it's dependent on rain. And when the rains are happening, say in the south, east hasn't yet started. So when the harvesting happens also, you can use harvesters where you can actually move them to the other area. But that has to be done again, as if we have some organized method. You don't have to expect every farmer to have a tractor, or every farmer to have the harvester. But that has to be driven into them through education and extension services. And Hayleys Agriculture, for example, we have a massive extension service and we do pass the knowledge to the farmers. And also, I must say, from the Ministry of Agriculture, there's this modernization project that has come forward and is doing, I mean, there'll be debate as to how much they are doing and how less or how much they should be doing, but at least it's happening. I can give you a good example for the green cucumber, the export agriculture we are doing. We were doing in Mahiyangana, we were doing also in Tampitiya, so all over. But when we identified this land in the north, in the east, in particular, a very impoverished place like Wakare. And so water was an issue. Then the World Bank enabled through the Ministry of Agriculture modernization project for the selected farmers that we had found. And we had found them, we have formed 5 farmer clusters of 100 each, to give the water pump and the sprinkler system. So they are now doing a very well-managed crop cultivation than what we used to do before. So the transformation of technology has to happen, and people industry players have to come forward to actually enable it, particularly because technology is expensive. But unless we do that, there is no way that we can actually look at high yielding crop cultivation and also to feed all these people at an affordable price.
So Jayanthi, maybe Vish may be also interested because
Yeah.
he's also in that field. What are the obstacles to some of the big companies? You know, we got great companies in Sri Lanka, Hayleys of this world, the Sunshines, the AAT Conferences, who have great management, who have run massive companies. What is the obstacle to them getting into real agriculture? I mean, we are doing extension, we are supporting others, but I'm saying, why don't they do agriculture as their business?
Yeah, so shall I go first?
Yes.
Vish? Yeah. So it's like this. Now, if when you take Sri Lanka, you know how difficult it is in actually, I mean, retaining labor at the most efficient levels and also bringing reform. So when, for example, if we are to, if a big company is to do on its own, then what happens is how efficiently you can deliver that product at the lowest cost. Particularly, Reyaz, when we are competing with global platforms, we have to make sure that the value addition has happened at the most economical manner. I mean, you can have world-class facilities, but when you get to actually producing that product on a global platform for sale, nobody pays world-class prices because everybody is looking for the cheapest source. At the same time, there's ownership. When you have the people owning, they put in much more effort. For example, if we had taken that Batikolo land for ourselves and we were to put people there to grow, there's no, I mean, as a company, they will grow. But when it's a farmer, the ownership and the part that they are in that value chain has a sense of belonging. And they take away, their incomes are much greater than actually being employees of the company. They themselves are entrepreneurs. So what we should be doing is allowing value addition throughout the supply chain by enabling them to take their produce to the global platform. So
But who's going to bear the cost of technology?
Yes, that's why now, for example, when we actually give something to the farmer, it's not given free. What we do is, yes, this is given as an input to you, and we will be actually taking some part of the payment that we make, so that they are going to own that product. So all these people, the farmers, are now like as if they are entrepreneurs. They are gaining something, they are producing something, and there is a sense of accountability that, look, I have taken this product from Hayleys Agriculture, but I need to also pay them back.
Which I know you all are into some of this yourselves. Any obstacles you see?
Yeah, so I think one of the bigger issues, and I'm going to give you an example why it is so difficult. It's the middleman involved. Okay, if you go to our villages where there are farming communities, etc., when a big company goes and wants to talk to these farmers and have them engage with you, there is ingrained middlemen involved that is in the system, right? They do not, and they have got these people indebted to them for 3 generations to come. You saw this happening in north of India when the Prime Minister decided to take away the middleman and ask the farmers to go direct to the supermarkets, etc. There was more than a 6-month strike because of the amount of money, everything that has been given in the system. That system is very, very ingrained. It is absolutely difficult to break that. You see? So there is it's a cultural thing that you need to change to overcome that issue. And these people will make sure you're indebted to this person or persons few generations. So they are always in the clutches of these people. So they will never work. And, for us to take over a large piece of land and deploy our own people. Where are you going to bring these people from? You have to take it from that local community, right? And you have seen this again and again, where government has given land to big companies. The moment you go and start clearing that land, there is a major hahoo saying that, you know, they're cutting the trees and blah, blah, blah. And it's not the truth. I mean, you have to clear a land. These are not virgin jungles. These are shrub land, right? You have to clear them so that you can plant. But the media takes it to a different level, right? So, I mean, having come from the plantation industry, and this is something that I want to, if you give me 2 minutes, you know, the 22 plantation companies that were run by the government was privatized through the stock exchange. You know, there's a lot of discussion today on how this SOE reform should be done. And this was successfully done. There was fair, transparent bidding at the stock exchange, and 51% of each of the companies were sold. Today, you know, all the companies are doing well, even though there is so much obstacle still, you know, with that so-called golden share that the government has, there's so much difficulty. So even in that, I mean, Hayleys has and Sunshine Holdings did land that we want to deploy to do other than tea or rubber or etc. So much obstacles. I mean, the ban on palm oil. I mean, what research, what data do they have in, I mean, there's two largest countries in the world, Malaysia and Indonesia, producing, you know, and we are talking about 20,000 hectares, right? And these are again not forests, these are not virgin jungles. But, you know, it's just arbitrary, single-minded, uneducated decisions.
But so I get your point, but I'm saying we need to change. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think I'm sometimes saying that, you know, this type of issues that we face now may be a good point. I still don't know the answer, but might be a good platform to try and call for that change. But I'm going to move on to slightly a different subject. I'm going to move to Talal. I know you talked about domestic debt restructuring as well. I'm sure you'd have read about the recent Ghana experience where they just concluded the restructuring. And they come up with some features I found very interesting. For example, they've said individual holders of debt will be exempt. And even the organizational holders or the institutional holders, they come up with some 3-tier type of reprofiling, 0 interest for the first 5 years, 5% and 10% for the next. I mean, what are initial thoughts about? I found particularly the exempting of individual holders an interesting experiment. Your thoughts?
Right. So discussing about domestic restructuring, as I mentioned, even in Zambia, the IMF has, sorry, I'm a bit losing my voice, has advised that it's not a good idea. So, so here the issue is, I was last week speaking to a few economists, which included Mr. Kumaraswamy, and here the issue is that with domestic debt restructuring, it's going to be a disaster, but at the same time, when compared to Zambia or others, we have a much higher percentage of interest going into domestic. So as you know, Nishan Dimel and Advocata were saying, maybe it's like we can get the bondholders or the bilaterals to say, let's exempt domestic debt restructuring. But if we don't do it, can the government continue to sustain itself? So that's a bigger question before we go into more of the details. But at the same time, it's also, I feel like the domestic debt restructuring would not be, because people have already suffered, because they've already taken a haircut with the inflation. So here again, it's a sort of a different story. So I had this opportunity to speak to some of the lawyers of the bondholders, and what they are saying is like they don't mind much. But most of the problem comes with the bilaterals, especially China would be the issue. So here again, I think it's a bit of a challenge, a very difficult line to tread.
Yeah, I know. We are all waiting to see where it goes. Mahen, you know, as an industrialist, I mean, you know, we all face twin challenges right now. Every company, I think, is about interest costs on one side, talking of AWPR in the range of 30% and inflation, crazy price values. How are you as finance director of a big conglomerate? How are you managing to meet those two challenges? I mean, you can't just let your shoulders drop. So how are you doing that at the moment? Something that maybe others can learn from.
Yeah. So I think I was telling a lot of people that, it's not a great time to be a finance director. So yes, we have all these challenges coming up. If you look at what has happened, especially from a Forex point of view, and when we lost our access to international markets, and especially with all the foreign exchange challenges, our letters of credit went out of the window. So if we were a company that was big on exports, especially imports, and if you were dependent on that for your raw materials, all of a sudden where you had 30, 90, 120 days credit, you had to pay for your raw materials in advance before even it left your foreign suppliers' warehouse. So this was a massive hit on working capital. So we had to pump in huge amounts of working capital to keep the business running just on working capital. So how do we do this? Fortunately, we were proactive. We saw the signs coming 2 years ago when all the rating agencies started making noise and we saw things were headed in a particular direction. We managed to, take on more facilities and we did them at fixed rates. So getting one step ahead of the curve always helps. This year, what we are doing in addition to all of that, to manage the issue, is we are very mindful of where we deploy our group cash. This is now like gold. So we are very careful with regard to CapEx. We are very careful with regard to our operational expenses. And all this money we are going to plow back and we will invest in managing our capital requirements. We can't go to banks in the short term. We are talking about 30%. But I think being proactive has helped us. And we have a couple of other strategies in terms of borrowings that we are putting into play that would not have a large impact on us in terms of interest costs.
Yeah, I empathize with you on the FD role. Vish, there is also a question. By the way, we're open for questions. Please send in your questions. I have a pad here for questions. Send it along. But until that comes along, I'm going to ask the panel a few questions myself. Vish, there is everybody knows we need to pay taxes. So we I think, had an easy ride all this time. But there's also a view that is being expressed in the marketplace that the government is taking the easy route by increasing taxes as a way of, bridging what their deficits. That a proper should have been a combined approach of looking at your expenses, trimming it, and at the same time, then people will feel less worried about paying out more. As a chamber, I know you have taken this up, but maybe it may be useful for the audience to know what the chamber's view on this has been.
Yeah. This is again a subject that the chamber has spent quite a bit of time talking to the government on, to be transparent on where these taxes are going, to be accountable, and to resist any new expenditure. And, I personally spent some time with our Secretary Treasury, who's probably just like you, has the worst job in the world right now. And I can tell you, just about he has sealed everything. There is no new expenditure in the government at all. I think the kind of circulars that they have sent out, for a government that was lavishly spending, almost all of it is frozen to a level they literally have to get the secretary Ministry of Finance permission on every single expenditure right now. So I don't think Sri Lanka has actually gone into this type of expenditure management in the last 30 years. I think the early part of the Civil War, we were doing this type of thing, and then the Civil War came in and everything went into the defense. So I think now expenditure management is probably at its best. You can see most of even the development work has come to a standstill, right? They're not doing anything because all the ADB funds were, rotated back to food and fuel. So none of it is happening. But we as citizens have to be, really vigilant. And if we see wastage, we have to point out. That's the only way. If we don't point out, it will just go back to where it is. Reyaz, the increase in taxes was inevitable. There is no other way. There was no other way than it was done. But I sincerely hope it will be consistent and we stay with this so our businesses can get used to this. So therefore, we will reduce wastage, we will reduce unnecessary expenditure, etc., and get used to paying this tax for us to get back to where we were. Yeah. So, I mean, this cannot be taken as a temporary measure. This is not temporary. This should be kept permanent, at least for some time till we come out of this.
Yeah, it's going to be the new norm. Absolutely. There is an interesting question that somebody's put up and they want me to answer that. So do you think politicians should have educational qualifications to enter the political arena? We see qualifications from each and every position except political. Yeah, I think I was at a forum 2 days ago where they're discussing about what they call ideal profile for a political leader. So I think lots of civil society groups are coming up with documents where they are trying to outline what should be the ideal profile for a politician. For example, they are saying not only educational qualifications, they're saying anybody who's coming should be prepared to declare their wealth, account for their wealth, and make a public declaration, not just file it in parliament. So like that, I think I saw one particular document which has been done with the Buddhist Congress, Cardinal has signed, a lot of people were fairly interesting characters. So I think the move is happening. Yeah, I saw yesterday that 90 of our MPs don't have even O-levels in a publication. So I think there is, a demand for greater, shall I say, level of literacy among politicians. So I think the change will happen. And somebody told me to expect, and I don't know how far this is true, that they think that there'll be a completely new set of team who might present themselves in the future election. I don't know how far it will happen, but these are predictions that are being made. But the point is taken. Yes, we need them. But I also want to say that some of our highly educated PhD professors also took us down the drain. So when we talk about politicians, we need to be a little mindful and careful about it's not just only political or educational qualifications. It also needs some sanity and realism. All right, I'm going to look at another question that has been come up. With political instability, can we advise investors, entrepreneurs to start their business in Sri Lanka? Because we see many move towards UAE. Vish, that's on your...
Yeah, just to touch on your previous one, education is one, but we should also make sure they don't have criminal records.
By the way, they have said that. Yeah, I forgot to say that. No criminal record is one of the requirements.
I think that seems to be a bigger problem than the education. I think the UAE is still, even though from outside when you see, it looks cheaper, and I think you have said this very clearly. It may be a tax-free place, but it's very, very, very expensive to do business. Even to live, it's expensive. Even after you invest, it's extremely expensive because at each level, there is a fee. For something or other, there is a fee. So if we can showcase Sri Lanka, especially with our, devalued currency, I think for foreign investors, we are, a great destination for their investment. All we need to show is that we have laws that will protect their investment, and then we don't change the rules in the middle of the game, right? Many of our investors who have come here has shied away is because we have this retrospective taxes. Nobody is used to retrospective taxes. Nobody is used to changing the rules of the game halfway through, right? So that is what. So if we can showcase and have some laws built in to the investment protection system, where if I bring in $100 million and invest, that my 100 million, other than if I make a loss because of a badly run business, that's a different story. But not because suddenly somebody comes into power and decides to say, you can't bring fertilizer here. Nobody will want to come here. So then Dubai is the best place because the rules don't change overnight, right? And even if when they change, there is a system that protects the investors. So I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, I think I do echo Vish's point. As somebody who lived and also overlooked the region, it is very expensive place to do business because everything has a levy. Even if those who want to apply for the golden visa will know that you have to pay 10,000 dirhams for every year to renew that. So it's a lot of money and it's not cheap. But like we said, it's consistent, very easy to get things done. I got a power of attorney for me and my wife done over the phone on a video call without even going before a lawyer. That's how well they're using technology. Okay, I have another question here, which maybe is suited for Jayanthi. It says, vegetable prices and others have gone up. Do you believe that the farmers have benefited from this, or is it going elsewhere?
The vegetable prices are going up for a number of reasons. One, of course, is the fact that the inputs that go into farming has gone up. Because if you know, like whether it is fertilizer or whether it's agrochemicals, they all come from abroad. And also, you know that the exchange rate against the dollar, the SLR has depreciated. On top of all these cultivations depend on the weather, and excessive rains or even not having rains, all that has an impact. So also we must remember that the fuel, that we actually faced a fuel crisis, and the vegetables could not actually come to Colombo, and we heard how much of it actually got stuck in rural areas. So it's a combined impact on the price. And what we truly believe is that vegetable prices should come down, because now with the fertilizer prices that have actually stabilized at much lower levels. One time it was about 39,000 a bag of fertilizer of 50 kg, has now come down to less than 20,000. So input price is coming down, but we must remember that lots of other conditions actually impact on the vegetable price.
Some people are writing in pencil and it's not easy to read. A related question, Jayanthi, maybe again. It says there is a lot of hype about green marketing, and but there is views that sometimes these are being manipulated. And what are your views? Are we really having a green, sustainable market economy in the agricultural sector?
Yes. See, how we have to look at it is, we have to look at it in a balanced manner. For example, you can now, when they say, okay, green agriculture for that matter, just like how people talk about organic, or how we should be actually using naturally sourced inputs, they all have a cost, and they all have a availability shortage. For example, Even when you want organic fertilizer, you don't have it in abundance. So, so we must take it in a balanced way where we actually should be going to the extent of environmentally safe and protecting the environment. That is one area we should be. And also, if you notice, agriculture should be moving now. A whole lot of chemicals were used long years ago, which were toxic. Now they are being graded and they are being banned. And so it's not that there's a total ban on agrochemicals. It's not possible, because even if you grow something in your own garden, the first crop will come and you're absolutely thrilled, and you go around saying that I never used any chemical fertilizer or didn't have to use agrochemical, and we got a harvest. But as it goes on, you know that pests actually then find their way to your own place. So you need to use it in a balanced manner. That's why people who are actually in the industry have to be very conscious of the environment and conscious of the people, and work with research, because unlike in Sri Lanka, where we can't put a lot of money into research, when you work with global partners, they have huge research budgets, and they come with less toxicity, globally safe products. So that's how we should be moving, not saying that we will totally go into organic, because even though Germany and world, in the rest of the globe, they are giving you a better price for organic, they themselves don't go for full organic. They have bigger land masses than us. So if organic was something so profitable and so good, they themselves will go to develop it.
Okay, this is a question for Talal. It says, how can Sri Lanka progress towards better international tax compliance and information sharing? For example, like the OECD countries.
As I was speaking to an expert from Estonia, one thing they said about taxes was how they digitized everything and made it very simple. Like even Professor Premchandra Athukorela says, it's better to have a much simpler form, something that's like, rather than have 10 different taxes, making it more complex. If you have a much more simpler thing, people are willing to do that. So that is one model that we can do, though I'm not an expert on taxation. But as far as others go, a thing that has been more successful when I speak to a number of other experts globally is that they feel that the process has to be much simpler. Like, for example, where you can easily find out how much you owe, and then just in one flat off thing do that. But here, for example, even if you take one example is EPF, ETF, others taxes, everything is like going to different departments. And you almost need one person working just to do that. And for him, you have to pay, him or her, you have to pay 50 to 60,000 just so he can fill up these things and send it to the different departments. Why don't you bring them all together into one thing? So this way, I believe that we can do a much better job.
All right, I think we are running close to time, but I'm going to give the privilege of the last question back to Vish, because the question has come. You seem to be very popular for our questions. There is a lot of projects that didn't continue due to this crisis, funded by Japan, China, etc. Development projects. What do you think are the solutions to this?
Yeah, so first of all, I think almost all these projects have to get re-evaluated and really see if it is going to benefit the development of the country. And I think that's where it will have to start. And, we may have to lose some of them if it's really not going to add value to the journey that Sri Lanka wants to make, right? And at what cost some of these developments can take place. Cost is very important. I don't think we have unlimited budgets, and we cannot go back to debt, right? We have to have a GDP to debt ratio that is manageable. We were above 100%, right? So most countries are at 17, 20, 25%. We are way above for a developing nation to have debt more than our GDP. So I think development projects funded by foreign countries always comes with some catches. So we have to be very careful, read between the lines, why these development projects are coming, how it's going to benefit our businesses, how it's going to benefit our people, how is it going to, affect our long-term debt. So these are all these things that will have to go in before we can continue on some of this.
So like all Sri Lankans do, all the questions start piling up at the end, but unfortunately, I cannot accommodate all of them because time's out. So it leaves for me to thank this excellent panel, Talal, Vish, Jayanthi and Mahen, for the interesting replies. I know I didn't give them the benefit of the questions beforehand. It came out of them instantly, but thank you for that. Over back to you.
Thank you very much. So as the panelists remain to be seated, I would like to call upon President AAT Sri Lanka, Mr. Nalin De Silva, been accompanied by Ms. Chamila Kure, Chairperson of Conference Committee over here, please. We are ready to present our session chair and the panelists with a very special token of appreciation. First, ladies and gentlemen, to the lady of the panel, Ms. Jayanthi Dharmasena, being appreciated, the Managing Director, Hayleys Agriculture Holdings Limited. Everyone, give it for Ms. Jayanthi Dharmasena. Then the presenter of the session, Mr. Talal Rafi, Senior Global Management Consultant, Deloitte. Mr. Mahen Saram, Group Finance Director, CBL Group. Everyone give it for Mr. Saram. Mr. Vish Govindasamy, Group Managing Director, Sunshine Holdings PLC, Chairman, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. And ladies and gentlemen, the session chair, Chairman of Baira Farms PLC, Mr. Reyaz Mihular. Right, it's time to take a group photograph.